What if the moment you step into an airport, before you even show your passport, your face becomes the real boarding pass and you never truly gave permission for it to be stored, shared, analyzed, or remembered forever? That single question sits at the center of one of the biggest, quietest revolutions happening in travel right now, and most travelers don't even realize it's already affecting them. Because biometric airport scanning sounds convenient on the surface, even futuristic. But underneath that smooth promise of faster lines and touchless travel lives a complicated web of ethical dilemmas, privacy risks, power imbalance, and decisions being made about your identity without you fully understanding the consequences. And as a professional travel planner, an airport security insider, and someone who has seen how systems work behind the scenes, I can tell you this isn't science fiction anymore. It's already happening in major airports across the world, including facial recognition at security checkpoints, biometric boarding gates, fingerprint-based immigration clearance, and even emotion detection experiments that claim to spot suspicious behavior just by analyzing your face. And here's the part that most people miss. Biometric data is not like a password you can reset. You can change a passport number. You can cancel a credit card, but you cannot change your face, your eyes, or your fingerprints. Once that data is compromised, leaked, misused, or repurposed, it's out there forever. And airports are collecting it at a scale we've never seen before, often partnering with private tech companies, government agencies, and international databases, all while presenting it to travelers as a simple convenience. A faster line, a smoother journey, a small trade-off. But is it really small when the trade is your permanent biological identity? Because the ethical dilemma begins with consent, or the illusion of it, since many biometric programs operate on opt-out models where your face is scanned unless you actively refuse. And refusal isn't always easy, clear, or even respected, especially when you're stressed, rushing to a gate, surrounded by signs that say biometric boarding only, and a staff member waving you forward. And even when opt-out exists on paper, the social pressure is real. No one wants to be that passenger holding up the line. So people comply without fully understanding what they're agreeing to. And that raises the first big ethical question. Can consent be meaningful if it's rushed, confusing, or tied to your ability to travel at all? Because let's be honest, travel isn't optional for many people. It's work, family, emergencies, and when access to movement depends on surrendering biometric data, the power balance shifts heavily toward institutions. And that's where privacy starts to erode quietly, not with a dramatic announcement, but with convenience, with smiles, with promises of efficiency. And from an airport security perspective, I understand why biometrics are attractive. They reduce human error. They speed up identity verification. They can catch imposters using fake documents, and in theory, they enhance safety. But theory and reality often part ways, because biometric systems are not neutral. They are trained on data sets that can be biased, leading to higher error rates for certain demographics. And when a system falsely flags someone, the consequences aren't just a pop-up error message. It can mean secondary screening, missed flights, questioning, humiliation, and in extreme cases, being placed on watch lists with no clear path to appeal. And that's another ethical dilemma: transparency, or rather, the lack of it, because most travelers have no idea how long their biometric data is stored, who exactly has access to it, whether it's shared across borders, or how to challenge a mistake. And as someone who has worked closely with airport operations, I can tell you that data sharing agreements are often complex, buried in legal language, and involve third-party vendors whose primary obligation is not to you, the traveler, but to contracts and profits. And once data flows into these systems, it can be reused for secondary purposes, training algorithms, improving models, testing new surveillance tools, all without your explicit knowledge. And the ethical line between security and surveillance starts to blur, because airports are unique spaces. They are semi-public, semi-governmental, heavily controlled, and historically, they've been places where privacy expectations are already lowered. So introducing biometrics there feels natural. Almost inevitable, but that normalization is dangerous. Because what starts at the airport rarely stays at the airport. Today it's boarding gates. Tomorrow it's hotels, rental cars, stadiums, city streets, and suddenly, facial recognition becomes the default way society verifies identity. And as a travel planner, I see how this affects traveler behavior. People start to feel watched, judged, analyzed, not just for who they are, but how they look, how they move, how they react. And that psychological effect matters because constant surveillance changes how people act. It discourages dissent, increases anxiety, and creates a quiet pressure to conform and ethically. We have to ask whether the marginal gains in efficiency are worth the long-term societal cost, especially when alternatives exist, like better staffing, improved document design, smarter scheduling, solutions that don't require harvesting immutable biological traits. And there's also the issue of data security, because biometric databases are prime targets for hackers. And history shows that no system is invulnerable. Breaches happen, insiders misuse access, data leaks. And when biometric data is stolen, it's not just an individual risk, it's a systemic one. Because compromised biometric identifiers can be used for identity theft, tracking, deepfake creation, and fraud at a level we're only beginning to understand, and yet, these risks are rarely communicated clearly to the public. Instead, marketing focuses on speed and hygiene, especially post-pandemic, where touchless became synonymous with safe. Even though touchless doesn't mean risk-free, it just shifts the risk from physical contact to digital permanence. And from an ethical standpoint, there's also the question of proportionality. Does scanning every face, every time, actually make us significantly safer? Or does it just create a massive archive of data with diminishing returns? Because many security experts quietly acknowledge that targeted intelligence and human judgment still catch most real threats. Not mass biometric screening, but mass screening looks impressive. It looks modern. It reassures the public and politically. It's easier to justify than investing in less visible improvements. And this is where ethics collide with optics. Because biometric programs are often rolled out with minimal public debate, framed as technical upgrades rather than policy decisions, even though they fundamentally change the relationship between the traveler and the state. And then there's the global inconsistency problem. Because different countries have different privacy laws, what's protected in one jurisdiction may be fair game in another. So when your biometric data is captured during international travel, it can cross borders digitally even faster than you do physically, entering legal gray zones where accountability becomes murky. And if something goes wrong, who do you complain to? Which authority? Under which law? And that uncertainty itself is an ethical failure. Because systems that affect millions should offer clear recourse, not confusion. And I've seen travelers who didn't even realize they were enrolled in biometric programs until months later, when they noticed they were being waved through checkpoints without showing ID. And while that feels convenient at first, it can also feel unsettling. Like the system knows you better than you know it. And the ethical dilemma deepens when we consider vulnerable populations. Refugees, asylum seekers, people with limited documentation, whose biometric data may be collected under pressure, stored indefinitely, and used in ways that affect their freedom of movement, their legal status, their safety, and for them. Opting out isn't really an option, and that challenges the moral foundation of these systems. Because ethics isn't just about the average traveler with choices. It's about those with the least power, and from an airport security expert's perspective. I'll be honest, biometrics are not going away. The momentum is too strong, the investment's too large. But ethical implementation is still possible. This is a big if travelers demand transparency, limits, and accountability, because right now, the conversation is happening mostly between governments and tech companies, not with the public, and that imbalance shapes outcomes. And here's the part that rarely makes it into promotional videos. Biometric systems are often piloted as temporary trials and then quietly become permanent. With expanded scope over time, a phenomenon known as function creep, where data collected for one purpose gradually gets used for others. And ethically, function creep is one of the biggest red flags because it erodes trust, and trust is essential for any security system to work. And when trust is lost, people comply out of fear or lack of alternatives, not because they believe the system is just, and that's not sustainable. And as someone who helps travelers navigate airports strategically, I always say this: the real luxury in travel isn't speed. It's control, knowing what's happening to you and your data, and having real choices, not just theoretical ones buried in fine print. And if biometric scanning continues to expand without clear safeguards, we risk creating a future where anonymity in public spaces becomes impossible, where movement is constantly logged, analyzed, and monetized, and where mistakes made by algorithms follow people for years. And ethically, that future demands serious scrutiny now, not after the systems are fully entrenched. So what can you actually do as a traveler beyond feeling uneasy? Because awareness alone isn't enough, and this is where practical airport hacks meet ethical responsibility. First, always ask whether biometric participation is optional. Even if signs imply it's mandatory, often there is an alternative lane. Second, read privacy notices when available, especially for airline apps that enroll you automatically. Third, avoid linking biometric programs across multiple services unless you're comfortable with the data sharing. Fourth, support policies in airlines that commit to minimal data retention and clear deletion timelines. And finally, talk about it, because ethical pressure only works when enough people care. And silence is interpreted as consent. So if you want a smooth trip without sacrificing your future privacy, the suggestion is simple but powerful. Treat your biometric data like your passport. Guard it carefully, question where it goes, and never trade permanent identity for temporary convenience without understanding the cost.